Welcome back to Kuma English Listening Hub. In today's episode, we're stepping aboard a mode of transport that many people thought was on its way out, the European sleeper train. While budget airlines have dominated travel for years, overnight trains are quietly gliding back into fashion. In this episode, we will explore why sleeper trains are returning, what they reveal about changing attitudes to travel, and how they blend nostalgia, practicality, and sustainability in a rather fascinating way. So, settle in, imagine the gentle rocking of the carriage, and let's set off down the tracks. First things first, what exactly is a sleeper train? At its simplest, it's a long-distance train equipped with beds or reclining seats, designed so that passengers can travel overnight. You might board in Paris in the evening and wake up in Vienna. You go to sleep in one country and open the blind to find a completely different landscape outside. It's part hotel, part transport, and, for many, part adventure. For decades, sleeper trains were seen as slightly old-fashioned, a bit quaint, even. By the early 2000s, they were, to use a British expression, looking rather tired. Low-cost airlines were offering astonishingly cheap flights across Europe, and travelers who wanted speed, or simply the lowest price, flocked to airports instead. Many national rail companies quietly scrapped their night services, assuming that the future lay firmly in the skies. And yet, here we are, in the 2022, watching a revival. New sleeper routes are appearing. Old ones are being upgraded. There are sleek new carriages, clever marketing campaigns, and Instagram feeds full of soft lamplight, wood paneling, and neatly made bunks. So what's going on? How did this supposedly outdated way of traveling manage such a comeback? To understand that, we need to rewind a little. Historically, overnight trains were a symbol of glamour and sophistication. Think of the Orient Express, white tablecloths, mirrored dining cars, and passengers in their evening best. Of course, much of that was mythologized, polished for novels and films. Still, there was genuine romance in the idea of traveling across a continent without ever leaving the ground. As mass flying took over, that glamour faded. Sleeper trains became associated with drafty corridors, suspiciously thin mattresses, and the sort of lukewarm coffee that no one is keen on. Many people regarded them as a slightly shabby relic of the past, suitable only for the die-hard train enthusiast or the budget backpacker who didn't mind being absolutely knackered on arrival. However, several forces have conspired to give sleeper trains a new lease of life. One of the most significant is the growing awareness of climate change. European travelers, particularly younger ones, are increasingly uneasy about the carbon footprint of frequent flying. Terms like flight shame have entered everyday conversation. People who once hopped on a plane without thinking are now asking themselves whether they really need to fly from London to Berlin or if there might be a more sustainable alternative. Enter the sleeper train. Unlike many so-called eco-friendly solutions, it doesn't involve sacrificing comfort. Quite the opposite. You can board a train, have dinner, settle into a bed, and let the miles roll by while you sleep. Instead of wasting a day traveling, you combine transport and accommodation in one fell swoop. For those who find airports stressful, the prospect of walking straight from a city center station onto a train feels wonderfully civilized. Another driving force is a change in our relationship with time. The pandemic, with its grounded flights and closed borders, made many people reassess what travel actually means. When restrictions eased, some travelers were surprisingly reluctant to go back to the old routine of sprinting through terminals, queuing for security, and being herded onto planes. There was a sense that perhaps travel could be slower, more deliberate, more, if you like, meaningful. Sleeper trains happen to fit this new mood rather neatly. They are not the fastest way to cross Europe, but they offer something that planes, for all their speed, simply cannot: a sense of continuity. You see the landscape gradually shift. You move through countries rather than leaping over them. You maintain, in a way, a physical relationship with distance. Now, this all sounds terribly poetic, but let's be clear. The modern sleeper train is not just about wistful romanticism. There's also a very practical side. Take business travelers. Picture a consultant who needs to go from Brussels to Vienna for a meeting. In the old days, they would finish work, dash to the airport, fly in the evening, get to a hotel late at night, and then try to sleep in a strange bed before an early start. With a sleeper train, they can board after dinner, work for a couple of hours using the onboard Wi-Fi, then retire to a private compartment. They wake up in Vienna, step off the train, and head straight to the meeting, having saved both a hotel night and a chunk of daytime. For families, the appeal is different but just as compelling. Rather than dragging children through airports at ungodly hours, you can turn the journey into part of the holiday. For a child, a bunk bed on a train feels like a tiny adventure playground. There's something magical about falling asleep while the world slides by in the darkness. Of course, we shouldn't be too starry-eyed. Sleeper trains also face serious challenges. They are expensive to run, requiring specialized carriages, extra staff, and complex scheduling. Unlike daytime trains, sleepers occupy tracks for long distances overnight, which can be tricky to coordinate across multiple national rail networks. One country's engineering works can throw the entire timetable into disarray. Then there's the matter of cost for passengers. While budget airlines can, at times, offer fares that seem almost suspiciously cheap, sleeper trains struggle to compete on price alone. A proper private compartment with its own shower and toilet can be, frankly, eye-wateringly expensive. Even shared couchettes may not always be cheaper than a flight plus a night in a budget hotel. So, why are people still keen on them? Part of the answer lies in the overall experience. At a certain point, some travelers are willing to pay extra for a journey that feels less like a chore and more like a treat. They don't just want to arrive. They want the process of getting there to be, if not glamorous, then at least pleasant. There's also an interesting cultural shift at play. Experiences that were once considered slightly downmarket are now being rediscovered and rebranded as authentic, even chic. Vinyl records, secondhand clothes, local markets all have undergone this transformation. Sleeper trains fit neatly into this pattern. What your grandparents might have taken for granted is now seen as charmingly retro. Let's look at a few concrete examples. In Austria, the National Rail Company has invested heavily in a network of sleeper services under the Nightjet brand. These trains connect cities such as Vienna, Berlin, Rome, and Amsterdam. They've introduced modern carriages with sleek design, improved bedding, and even small suites with en-suite bathrooms. The idea is to make the journey feel contemporary, not like a museum piece. Meanwhile, in Sweden, a renewed interest in night trains links to the wider Nordic commitment to environmental responsibility. Travelers who are reluctant to fly for domestic or regional trips can opt for comfortable overnight trains instead. In some cases, companies and public institutions actively encourage staff to take the train rather than fly, even if it takes a bit longer. Private companies are getting in on the act as well. In France and Spain, new operators are experimenting with fresh business models, hoping to capture a growing segment of travelers who are both environmentally conscious and somewhat nostalgic. It's not all smooth sailing, though, or smooth rolling if you prefer. Not all governments are convinced that sleeper trains are worth the investment. Some argue that high-speed daytime trains, combined with efficient connections, make overnight services redundant. Others worry that the financial burden of maintaining and upgrading sleeper stock is simply too great, especially when public transport budgets are already stretched. Then there's the competitive pressure from buses and coaches. Overnight coaches can undercut sleeper trains by a considerable margin, and while they are rarely as comfortable, they do appeal to cost-conscious travelers. For students or those on very tight budgets, the choice between a plush sleeper cabin and a much cheaper bus is, understandably, a no-brainer. Yet despite all these obstacles, the narrative of decline has been quietly replaced by one of cautious optimism. And this raises deeper questions about how we want to move around our continent in the coming decades. Will we continue to prioritize speed at all costs, hopping from airport to airport, viewing distance as something to be conquered as quickly as possible? Or will we accept, perhaps even embrace, a slightly slower, more measured style of travel in which the journey and the destination are seen as part of the same experience? In Britain, this debate plays out in a particular way. The UK, being an island, has a slightly different relationship with sleeper trains. Within the country, the most famous overnight services link London with Scotland and Cornwall. Travelers can board the Caledonian Sleeper, have a whiskey in the lounge car, and wake up beneath the mountains of the Highlands. It's not cheap, and opinions are divided on whether the service always lives up to its glossy marketing, but the idea of it is undeniably appealing. There's something distinctly British about this mixture of practicality and romance. On the one hand, you've got the commuter mentality. Get there, get it sorted, don't fuss. On the other, there's a willingness to indulge in a bit of old-fashioned charm, the notion of gliding through the night, a novel in hand, while the rain streaks the windows. Culturally, sleeper trains also occupy an interesting space in our imagination. They are perfect settings for stories, confined, slightly mysterious, and full of strangers. Think of crime novels set on night trains, where suspects linger in the corridor and secrets are overheard through thin walls. The journey has a natural narrative arc: departure, the long dark middle, and eventual arrival. It's no wonder writers and filmmakers keep returning to it. For language learners, the resurgence of sleeper trains offers a very practical opportunity. Imagine planning an itinerary where you use night trains to move between several European countries. You could spend your days exploring cities, practicing local languages, and your nights traveling. On board, you might share a compartment with people from different backgrounds, overhear snippets of conversation in multiple languages, or chat with the attendant about routes and reservations. From a linguistic point of view, sleeper trains are little laboratories of interaction. There's the polite small talk when you first meet your compartment companions. There are negotiations over who gets which bunk, when to turn off the light, and whether it's fair enough to open the window. You may need to navigate ticket inspections, border checks, or last-minute platform changes. All of this requires flexible, real-time language use. Before we begin to wrap up, it's worth asking whether this resurgence of sleeper trains is just a passing fad, a bit of nostalgia dressed up as innovation, or whether it signals a deeper, more permanent shift. Realistically, night trains are unlikely to replace planes entirely. For very long distances or urgent trips, flying will probably remain the default. But for medium-distance journeys within Europe, especially those between major cities, sleeper trains have a genuine chance of becoming a mainstream option again. If they are to succeed, several conditions need to be met. Governments will have to cooperate across borders, aligning timetables, ticketing systems, and infrastructure planning. Operators will need to ensure that trains are reliable, safe, and comfortable, not just theoretically, but in everyday practice. And prices will have to remain competitive enough that ordinary travelers feel they are getting decent value for money. Most importantly, though, travelers themselves will need to decide what they value. Are they prepared to spend an extra few hours on the move in exchange for lower emissions, less airport stress, and a journey that feels, for want of a better word, human? Or will the lure of the cheap, quick flight prove too strong? At the moment, the signs are cautiously encouraging. Bookings on many new sleeper routes have been, as the British might say, pretty decent. Environmental concerns are not going away, and there is a growing recognition that if we are serious about tackling climate change, we can't keep pretending that frequent flying is entirely consequence-free. So the next time you're planning a journey across Europe, you might, just for a moment, consider an alternative. Instead of a dawn flight and a bleary-eyed stumble through security, you could have a proper dinner, wander to the station at a civilized hour, and fall asleep to the rhythm of the rails. You could wake up, pull up the blind, and find a new city waiting outside the window. It won't be perfect. The train might be delayed. The neighbor in the next compartment might snore. The coffee might still be a bit questionable. But there is something quietly transformative about reclaiming the journey as part of the experience, rather than treating it as dead time to be endured. And if enough of us decide that this way of traveling is not only bearable but actually rather brilliant, then the humble sleeper train, once written off as a relic, may yet have a long and fascinating future ahead. That's all for today's episode from Kuma English Listening Hub. If you'd like to use this listening to push your English towards a genuinely C2 level, try this. First, Listen again without subtitles and note down any expressions that strike you as particularly British, such as spot on, keen on, or knackered. Second, summarize the main arguments for and against sleeper trains in no more than 5 sentences. Finally, imagine you are designing a new sleeper route in Europe and record yourself explaining why your service would be attractive to travelers. Thanks for listening and cheers for staying with me right to the end. Until next time, travel well, sleep soundly, and keep listening.